Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Crypto Tips. My name is Heidi and today we're going to talk about what's really happening with the Bitcoin ETFs, or is it a Bitcoin futures ETF, and how that's going to affect Bitcoin in the future, and definitely some things that we all need to be concerned about. So first things first, what is a Bitcoin ETF right off the bat? Basically, it's called an exchange traded fund. It's a fund that is run by a company that is holding the underlying asset, which in this case would be Bitcoin, holding the real Bitcoin in their possession, and they offer you shares in that fund represented on the stock exchange, like NASDAQ, for example. That is what Dubai has done, that's what Canada has done, that's what Europe did, and everyone is waiting for when the US is going to finally approve that, when the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission, is going to approve the Bitcoin ETF for the US. Now we're getting news that there will be, I think, about 4 that are likely to be approved within the next week or couple weeks. But here's the thing, these are not pure Bitcoin ETFs. These are Bitcoin futures ETFs. That means that the underlying asset that these companies are holding and you're buying shares of, it's not the actual Bitcoin, it's the futures contracts of Bitcoin. And it's very ironic that the SEC chairman, Gensler, has been quoted as saying he's very excited to finally look over the applications for a Bitcoin futures ETF, when since 2013 the SEC has been denying these pure Bitcoin ETFs time and time again. They're excited for these Bitcoin futures. Here's the irony, is that the reason they've been denying these Bitcoin ETFs is for, concerns about transparency, liquidity, price manipulation that can happen with Bitcoin, and so to protect the investors in the ETFs from maybe falling victim from the price manipulation that can happen to the pure Bitcoin on the Bitcoin markets, they're denying these ETFs. The irony here is that a Bitcoin futures ETF opens the door far wider for price manipulation by the hedge funds that would be doing things with their futures contracts compared to the actual spot price of Bitcoin, the actual fair market price of Bitcoin. You can go on Binance.com and buy Bitcoin. That price will be different than the futures price depending on how these hedge funds are dealing with these futures contracts. So what you really need to understand is, what is a futures contract, since that will be the basis of these Bitcoin futures ETFs that everyone is so excited about. A futures contract basically means that, let's say you and I decide to sign a contract that one of us will buy and one of us will sell an amount of Bitcoin at a specific price at a specific date in the future. No matter what actually the price is of Bitcoin at that future date, that expiration date, one of us will be buying it and one of us will be selling it based on that contract that we came up with. So the big difference here is, because the underlying asset of the Bitcoin futures ETF is these futures contracts and not the actual price, the actual asset itself of Bitcoin, these hedge fund managers can do some price manipulation by pretty much putting a really long-term futures contracts, basically going really long, being like displaying a really strong faith in the future price of Bitcoin. And in that way, they can manipulate the Bitcoin futures price to actually increase compared to the actual asset of Bitcoin, because again, this is just a futures contract. It's not actually buying and selling Bitcoin at that time. So what they can do is they can push this price of the futures contracts up, and whoever is in that ETF will probably benefit from that increase in price. And what these hedge funds can then do is sell those futures contracts at a profit at a price that is much higher than the spot price of Bitcoin, and then buy up Bitcoin at a discount. So there's all sorts of ways that price manipulation can happen, not to mention the fact that we're already paying a lot of attention to the futures, their expiration dates, a lot of anticipation in the market, a lot of emotional and psychological things at play that affect the price of Bitcoin, at least in the short term. So the irony here is that the chairman of the SEC is saying that Bitcoin itself is too easily manipulated for them to feel safe to offer an actual Bitcoin ETF. But they're going to go ahead and allow it for an even more easily manipulated way through these Bitcoin futures ETFs. So here's the thing I need you to pay attention to, right, is that Grayscale is another perfect example of a company that has a ton of Bitcoin, and their GBTC is actually tied. It's an ETF-like investment product, and they're already holding like 4% of the total supply of Bitcoin. That's huge. Now, if a Bitcoin ETF is actually approved in the US, like I said before, there's actually Bitcoin ETFs, not Bitcoin futures ETFs, in Dubai, in Canada, and in Europe. But if the US were to do this as well, then these funds that are actually going to have to buy Bitcoin off the market to support this ETF, that's a huge supply. And so this is my encouragement for you, is to be a hodler of last resort, at least to some extent. Have some amount of Bitcoin that you will never sell, because this is going to be an even more rare product for you to actually own purely unadulterated Bitcoin without any kind of a silly third party in there trying to tell you how much easier it is to own Bitcoin through them. Just buy yourself some Bitcoin. It's not that difficult. They love to market these ETFs and other investment products as more easy to than trying to figure out how to buy Bitcoin on an exchange, let alone trying to figure out how to store it safely, because you know that's a mystery that no one's ever figured out. Let me tell you from experience, if I can do it, anyone can do it. And it's so much at your fingertips, especially now how much information is out about how to do crypto correctly and independently and autonomously. This is what our channel is all about. So it's definitely worth your time to learn how to do that. If you're feeling overwhelmed, this is my encouragement for you to just dive in, and you will get it, I promise you. So anyway, if you guys enjoy this video, please hit the like button and hit subscribe if you haven't yet. I know there's a few out here who are watching and you're not subscribed. And for those of you who are, make sure you have the bell notification turned on so you can get notified when these videos are coming out. We're pumping out every day. Anyway, thank you guys for tuning in. I'll see you again real soon. Bye.